Good afternoon. I just want to check if you can hear me.
Yes, Mr. Jacob, we can hear you perfectly. You are audible as well as perfectly, we can see you.
That's good. And I'm happy that you used that old photo of me for the presentation. This was taken in Jakarta a few years back when the Danish Queen visited. I've never looked better.
Okay, great.
So Cheryl made sure she gives us your best photograph.
Yeah, but she's fantastic.
Where you look most handsome.
Yeah, it's downhill from there. Thank you.
So the session is live now. We can start.
Dr. Bina, DIG Makwana's team is working with the IT team. They might be joining in some time. He's slotted anyhow in the fourth slot. And as you know, Mr. Paliwal is just completing one session. So we are live, we start, and then we proceed.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. On behalf of the Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways, Government of India, it is my privilege to welcome the distinguished speakers and delegates to Breakout Session 4 of Maritime India Summit 2021. This session will discuss bulk cargo transportation with focus on liquid cargo. The session assumes tremendous significance in terms of the sheer volumes it entails. Now, let me request Vicky to present the profiles of the conveners, please. We have Mr. Sunil Paliwal, who is the chairman of the Kamarajar Port Limited. He's a senior Tamil Nadu cadre IAS officer. He's holding the post of chairman cum managing director, Kamarajar Port Limited. Earlier, he has served as principal secretary to Government of Tamil Nadu in various departments. He holds a BTech degree from IIT Kanpur and MS from the University of Maryland and MBA from the University of Birmingham. Mr. Sunil Kumar, Joint Secretary Refineries, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. He is an IRAS 1995 batch officer. He is presently posted as Joint Secretary Refineries, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas since May 2019. As Joint Secretary Refineries, he is looking after matters related to refineries, auto fuel policy, petrochemicals, import-export of crude fuel and other petroleum products, biofuels, renewable energy and conservation, integrated energy policy, climate change, and national clean energy policy.
Let me also take this opportunity to introduce another convener for the session, Dr. M. Bina, the chairman of Cochin Port Trust. She will be conducting this overall session. She is the chairman of Cochin Port Trust since October 2018. Interesting fact is that she is a medical doctor by profession and she got into the IAS from the Kerala cadre. She has served for almost 20 years and she has had varied experience in sectors like infrastructure development, transportation, airport cargo handling, financial services, etc., to name a few. So welcome, Dr. Bina, Mr. Sunil Kumar, and all the esteemed panelists. Ma'am, over to you. You can start the session, please.
Thank you, Vicky team. This breakout session has been organized to cover all aspects of bulk liquid cargo transportation, and the session has 5 eminent speakers, both international and national. But to present the theme of today's session, we have arranged a short video. Vicky team may please play the video.
Around 80% of global trade by volume and over 70% by value is seaborne. 1/3 of this global trade is dominated by liquid bulk cargo transportation. The significant rise in demand of energy and oil and gas exploration activities will boost demand for marine transportation and creates vast opportunities in liquid bulk business. This, in turn, is likely to drive the global liquid and bulk transportation. India, the world's third largest consumer of oil, the fourth largest oil refiner and a net exporter of refined products, traded 440 million tons of liquid bulk cargo at its ports during 2019-20. The spur in the economy under the Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative will further trigger the manufacturing activities locally and in turn heightened demand for an efficient port system for handling the import of petrochemical raw materials and export of finished goods. During 2019-20, the 12 major ports in India handled 237 million tons of liquid bulk, which is about 34% of the total port business. With exclusive berthing points for handling liquid bulk cargo, including LNG and LPG, multi-purpose berths, and single-point moorings, the major ports handled over 8,000 liquid bulk carriers during 2019-20. In order to service the growing market of liquid bulk products, the Indian ports have taken up a slew of infrastructure spending, a majority of which will be implemented through public-private partnership route. The Government of India has identified critical infrastructure projects under the Maritime India Vision 2030 to enhance the overall port capacity. To meet the soaring demand in the liquid bulk business, about 90 million tons will be added to the present 505 million tons of liquid bulk handling capacity. The government's focus in public-private partnership ventures coupled with the growing energy requirements has fueled plenty of opportunities for the private investor, mainly in liquid bulk terminals, storage terminals, pipeline grades and related business, petrochemical-based industrial clusters, bunkering business, LNG-based cold chain logistics, partnering in the world's largest oil refinery, and petrochemical mega project slated to be taken up on the western Indian coast, and in HSSC training and skill development program. Indian major ports are gateways that connect the economy to the global markets through maritime transport networks and to the hinterland through multimodal transport. Come, partner in the development initiatives in the liquid bulk transportation business in India and join hands towards attaining the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat.
Thank you. May I now request the esteemed Chairman and Managing Director of Kamarajar Port Limited, Mr. Sunil Paliwal, to set the context for today's session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Beena. Can we have the presentation, please? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants, depending on the country from which they are participating in this Maritime India Summit. Next slide, please. This session is very timely today because we all know that the bulk transport, it is having a lion's share of the global sea trade, and it is especially important in the context of Indian maritime trade, where it is around 70% of the entire trade which is happening. In that also, out of this also, almost half, and in some cases more than half of this bulk is in the form of liquid bulk, and hence the importance of this session. Next slide, please. As far as India is concerned, this is the place to be. We all know that it is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And as far as consumption of energy is concerned, it is already among the top 3 countries in the world. And it is among the top 3 importers of crude. And within few years, it is expected to move to 2nd position in import of crude because of the growing demand for energy in the country. It is estimated that till 2040, whatever incremental growth will take place in crude consumption in the world, of that 40% of the demand will be coming from India. Next slide, please. India is already among the top 2 coal importing countries in the world. In fact, it is almost neck to neck with Japan in terms of coal import. And it is expected that within next 9 to 10 years, coal consumption of India will be surpassing that of USA. In order to meet this fast increasing demand, India is already planning ahead, and from the current refining capacity of 249 million tons per annum, it is targeted that by 2030, this capacity will be doubled. Of course, this will require a corresponding addition in the storage space. We have to develop seaside facilities in our ports, and we will be parallelly working on the cross-country crude and product pipelines. Government of India is giving a lot of thrust to the city gas distribution, and in order to feed the city gas distribution, which is expected to grow at the compounded annual growth rate of 10% in the next 9 to 10 years, this gas grid is being developed. Next slide, please. Now, not only in India, but all across the world, many changes are taking place. We know that demographies are changing. In some countries, population is either stagnating or going down, but in many countries of Asia and Africa, the population is increasing, and it is expected that between now and 2030, the population of the world will reach 8 billion, and of this, the 96% growth will be coming from developing countries, and these developing countries will be host to young population, which is the aspirational segment of the population, and these changing aspirations, which also will happen because of the growth of middle class and increasing urbanization, this entire trade center may change, and many technological developments are also taking place. We are all shifting from the fossil fuels to non-conventional sources of energy. So again, the texture of this trade will also change. The components will change. There is also a shift worldwide towards electric vehicles. Again, the kind of fuels that will be consumed and where it will be consumed is also changing. Then there are environmental factors which will also lead to shift in the bulk cargo transportation, because global warming is happening. So it is expected that Arctic will be slowly opening up, and 25% of the undeveloped reserves of oil and gas are in Arctic. They may become accessible to us. So that will also change how the trade happens. And last but not the least, political factors, because if countries compete against each other, then there will be a different trade pattern. If they cooperate with each other, that will lead to a different trade pattern. So these are all factors which will be affecting how the seabound trade happens in future. Next slide, please. This session is structured according to what is shown on the slide here. And we are trying to cover global trends and Indian trends. And we have 5 eminent speakers who will be talking about emerging global trends in bulk liquid cargo, on status of bulk cargo transportation in India, and how India is offering a huge opportunity. And while addressing this opportunity, we cannot lose sight of the environmental factors. So we have eminent speaker on that also. And then, how technology, developments in technology will be affecting how we deal in bulk liquid cargo transportation. Next slide, please. In the first session, speaker will be talking about emerging global trends in bulk liquid cargo. Dr. Clay will be doing that. And in this, what is relevant to us is, how the crude and natural gas production is increasing, how it needs to be transported, how it will be consumed. Then these production centers and consumption centers are changing. For example, it is expected that in many countries there will be a geographical change on from where we are extracting oil and gas. Like for example, in case of Russia, it is expected that it will move towards east from the western part of the country. Similarly, consumption centers may increase more in Asia and Africa. And for that, when we are shifting to gas, there may be a need to create new infrastructure, and the existing infrastructure may become redundant. There will be efficiency gains so that we extract more out of the same quantity of fuel that we consume. That will also be changing. And depending upon how we trade, we will be giving importance to economies of scale and easy scalability of the infrastructure. Next slide, please. As far as India is concerned, Mr. Nigam will be talking about how capacity building has to be done in ports and how this movement to and ports from the hinterland will take place. So what kind of distribution network improvements are taking place and how the storage capacities are being added to. And within the country, for example, within India, it is expected that Eastern India will be growing at a much faster rate in terms of consumption. So how that will be addressed. Next slide, please. Now, the third speaker will be talking about Mr. Sorensen. He'll be talking about expansion and upgradation of bulk cargo capacity. So as we all know that India will be among the top three. It actually may move to the second position, even overtaking USA. Then International Energy Agency has estimated that India will be leading in the increase in the energy demand compared to any other country for the next 2 decades till 2040. Government of India is also stressing the need to improve energy consumption because that is directly linked to the GDP growth. And it is also aiming that LNG should have a larger share, and it aims to make it 15% in our energy basket by 2030 compared to 6.5%. This Ujjwala scheme of Government of India has been a very good success, where it aims to provide the cleaner fuel of LPG to the lower income households. Then India is also aiming to set up the largest refinery in the world in the western part of the country, in the state of Maharashtra. So these all will be changing the pattern. Next slide, please. Indian Coast Guard is the nodal agency for handling issues like oil spill, etc., or any disaster which may happen. So DIG, Mr. Makwana, will be talking about that to all of us. Next slide, please. The fifth speaker, Mr. Abhijit Gusain, he will be talking about that, how we can minimize human intervention and we can increase the usage of the latest technology, how we can digitize our operations so that not only we avoid losses, but we also ensure better efficiency and safety. Next slide, please. This, proof of pudding is in eating. So as we all say that, future lies with India, which aims to be a $5 trillion economy by 2024. And through this summit and through this session, we are inviting the participants to be to join us to be a part of this wonderful journey that India has set itself upon. And the proof is that, as a part of this summit itself, more than 60 investors have come forward to sign MOUs with various agencies. And these MOUs are worth more than $13.5 billion US. And we are very confident about this journey and this wonderful journey that we have set for us. And we invite you to be a part of this journey. I'm very sure that the participants here of this session will have a lot to take away from this session. And we are thankful to these 5 speakers who have come forward, accepted our invitation to be a part of this session. I thank the ministry for giving me this opportunity to be a convener of this session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for the context-setting presentation. In fact, it gives us all a lot of hope and positive vibes that so many MOUs have already been signed. So it beckons a lot of new good tidings in this sector. Before I move to the first speaker, I would request all the delegates who are viewing this broadcast on the FICCI Bike platform to share their queries in Ask Your Question feature in the auditorium page. We are moving on to the first speaker, Dr. Catherine Clay, who is the president of International Liquid Terminals Association, the only US-based trade association to exclusively represent the tanks and terminal industry. She came to the ILTA from the American Gas Association, where she served as Vice President of Policy. She holds a PhD in Applied Physics and an MS degree in Electrical Engineering, both from the University of Michigan and Harvard. Over to you, ma'am. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for the kind introduction and so much for the invitation to be here and to be part of this august breakout session. I'm very pleased that the International Liquid Terminals Association is one of the partners that has signed a memorandum of understanding. We've signed that with the Indian Ports Association, and our intention is to use that as a platform for information exchange. I am very impressed as the more that I learn, and I thank the previous speakers for setting the context so adroitly, so wonderfully. The scale of growth in India's both energy demand and its investment in infrastructure, and doing that growth in a smart way. I particularly commend the decision to achieve so much of this work through public-private partnerships. And I believe that there is much opportunity for us to find collaborative ways to work together, not only through exploring ways that my membership in US-based companies might be part of some kind of support and involvement in the PPPs, but also in the critical area of information exchange, operational excellence as India grows in these very dramatic ways. We have much we can learn from India, and I believe that our members and the expertise in our industry in the US-based companies can also have something to share. So with that, I know that we have a lot to cover in a very short amount of time, so my presentation will be brief. But what I would like to share with you is a view of some recent analysis that has been conducted by our Department of Energy, our government Department of Energy's information, the Energy Information Administration within our DOE, and in particular their 2021 Energy Annual Outlook. Of course, in my first slide here, I've taken a moment to just reinforce that story that I think is so familiar to those of us that are participating in this breakout session. But I think it bears noting just how critical liquid terminals are to not just energy flows, but to so many valuable commodities, chemicals, food products. Of course, our focus here today is primarily on energy, but it is a story that is worth telling is that whenever you have intermodal transport of any bulk kind of liquids, at some point in the life of that commodity in the value chain, it will pass through a terminal. Terminals provide a unique and vital function in helping to balance sometimes disruptions in market supply and demand. We saw a very critical example of this in about April of 2020, when in fact the price of our crude oil in a very specific market in the US briefly went negative. Now, what does that mean for a crude oil price to go negative? in a very simple way, it fundamentally means that there was no available storage, that it was impossible or not practicable for the owner of that commodity to take physical possession of it because they did not have the storage available for that commodity. And that means that the liquid storage capacity for crude oil had reached or had come very close to reaching its maximum. To us, that was an opportunity to show the world that this is usually an invisible service that is provided by liquid terminals. The constant balancing on usually a smaller and more manageable scale of the supply and the demand. That was a moment in time where we saw what the world might look like if we didn't have that constant service, that constant value that terminals provide for all liquid commodity markets, but in that moment in particular, the crude oil market. So if we go to the next slide, I will begin to give you a glimpse into what our EIA is projecting, a look back at what we have been doing in the US in our energy flows of oil and natural gas in particular. And then as we move forward towards the end of my slides, I will share a vision forward of what our EIA is projecting the future will look like. I think most importantly for our topic here together today is on the left side of this chart showing 2019 US crude oil export destinations. And that, of course, is a story I think familiar to all of you. And that is that India is a dramatically important trading partner for the United States. And that status will only grow as we've seen by the context setting that has preceded my own remarks. So India is already at nearly 9% of US crude as an export destination as a percentage of our crude exports. And of course, we all know that since the shale oil and gas revolution came to the United States about a decade ago, we have been on a strong growth trajectory in the US that is projected to continue. The picture on the right showing US crude oil export trends, and this graph is in million barrels per day, shows just a look back over the last 5 years. And even just in the last 5 years, the story is quite a dramatic one. That growth is real. It is continuing because that shale oil and gas resource continues to be something that was unforeseen even just a decade and a half ago. It was back then when I was actually working on our US Capitol, working for the United States Senate as a staffer, we were contemplating that the US was going to run out of oil. We were looking to the day when we would run out of oil. We were working to site not LNG export terminals, but in that day, we were working to try to site LNG import terminals because we anticipated a very different energy future. Now, of course, the benefit and that munificence of that resource is something that is a great story for the United States, but also is a benefit to all of our trading partners. And India is an incredibly example of a country that we can work with as a partner and to our mutual benefit. The next slide, if we can move on to that. This now turns to look at natural gas. Again, a very similar story because of the shale oil and gas revolution. But what two side-by-side graphs, again from EIA, are showing us that natural gas imports peaked in 2007. That was, again, that the time when I was working on Capitol Hill coincided with the Energy Act of 2007, a very comprehensive energy bill. And that was the context we were imagining the world. Well, the world has certainly changed. And in fact, that was the peak year for imports. And the work that went into siting natural gas import facilities has now almost fully transitioned to natural gas exporting facilities. Natural gas exports reached a record high in 2019, as you can see by that very dramatic red line in the chart on the left. Until 2020, the U.S. had U.S. exports of annual volumes of natural gas were mostly by pipeline to Mexico and Canada. The total annual exports generally increased each year from 2000 to 2019 as natural gas production continued. But what we are seeing is that now the aggregate is seeing a more significant share, not just from pipelines to our neighbors to the north and south in North America, but to partners around the world through LNG. LNG is through maritime and through bulk through overseas transit. If we could go to the next slide, we will start to look not just at the past, which in the last few years has been dramatic and important, but now also I would like to share a view of what we expect going forward. Of course, again, that story on the left graph is emphasizing the point that liquefied natural gas exports are dramatically increasing. And this is a story that has taken off in the last handful of years, but we are at the beginning of a very exciting chapter that will only continue. This is further supported by the graph that I'm sharing on the right side of the screen, which shows that growing industrial consumption is also part of what is driving demand in the United States as we use more and more natural gas, in our case, in our energy power to offset coal production with natural gas, driven not just by economic concerns, also growing climate and sustainability concerns. But the other important story there is, again, if you look at the gray line that sort of starts at the very low part of the graph on the left side in the 2000 to 2010 timeframe, but then starts to make that journey up. And we see that from the 2020 to 2030 era, our energy administration is projecting growth, and then more of a stabilization from 2030 going out to 2050 in terms of our LNG exports. And then if we can go on to the next slide, again, I wanted to leave you with some forward-looking thoughts about where the U.S. will be as an energy producer and as a trading partner. EIA 2021 reference case is predicting that U.S. crude oil production will plateau after 2030. Now, of course, as we know, energy markets are legendary in their difficulty in making projections, especially out more than 10 years. And so you see that in the variety of cases that we are considering in the 2030 to 2050 timeframe. So the high oil and gas supply assumes a high oil price is sustained. That gives us that upper curve. And then there is quite a large distinction between what the reference case and what the lower oil price case would indicate in terms of production, and then hence our ability to be an exporter and trade partner. A very similar case in natural gas, we are bullish and growth. These two side-by-side charts here that show these cases for dry natural gas production and natural gas consumption in the United States. But in all cases, natural gas production is even projected to be on a stronger growth path than our oil production in the United States. So the economics of our shale basins continue to be strong. The U.S. is well positioned to continue to play an important role as a growing energy producer, as a growing partner, and it means that the liquid terminal industry, as seen in the previous presenter slides, which I applaud, taking to heart how important investments are in that infrastructure to sustain the kind of trade and energy flows that we will be certainly seeing in the decades to come. This is the time to make those investments, to make those partnerships, because that is what will sustain the growth of a dramatically exciting economy like India's. And I am very excited to be part of this industry that will play a supporting role in growth, not just for the United States, but for India as well. And so with that, I thank you for your kind attention and for your kind invitation. And I look forward to learning from all of my fellow panelists. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Clay. That was a very interesting exposition, not just on oil, but the gas and the comparative picture. Thank you so much. May I now invite the next speaker. The next speaker is Mr. Rajesh Nigam, who is Executive Director, Supply and Distribution for the Indian Oil Corporation. He's a mechanical engineer from NIT Rourkela. He joined the IOC's marketing division in the year 1985. He has more than 36 years of service, where he has worked in various functions of LPG operations, supply, and distribution for Indian Oil Corporation. He's the longest serving supply chain executive, not only for IOC, but for the entire country's oil industry. He is All India Product Coordinator for India's oil industry and has successfully implemented 3 phases of green fuels in the country. Welcome, Mr. Rajesh, and over to you.
Thank you, Madam. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for the delegates across the globe. It's my privilege to be among this august gathering of the panel speakers. Our JSR, Mr. Sunil Kumar from MOPNG, a person who has spearheaded the BS6 implementation of auto fuels in the country. And we have 2 eminent administrators, one in the major East Coast and one of the major West Coast, Mr. Sunil Paliwal, Chairman, Kamraju Port, and Madam Beena of Kochi Port. And we have a very eminent speaker, Madam Clay, Mr. Jacob, Mr. Rajesh, Mr. Abhijit. Big namaskar to you all, and namaskar to all the delegates to webcast. Now, I would like to show you a slide which gives a picture of how the coastal movements are being moving across the globe. Now, if you have a look, much of the traffic is moving from Japan, which goes to Indonesia, Singapore, and it travels majorly through India. This western coast of India, all this traffic goes to the major hubs at Fujairah, then it goes to Netherlands. So what we see here is basically India is at the crossroad of 2 major international trade routes, which starts from Singapore, from this eastern hemisphere, from Singapore to Middle East and to Europe. Now, this gives an immense opportunity for India to have our maritime industry to grow a lot. What we have seen and what we have heard, 95% of the international trade is through coastal, with 90% of the volume, and coal and iron ore and container basically constitutes 80% of this volume. India, being the 3rd largest energy consumer, is also the 3rd largest oil and gas importer in the world. Having seen this, fuel and gas constitutes around 40% of India's present global cargo handling volumes. India, with a modal mix of coastal, is just 6% as compared to 47% of China, 34% of Japan, and 12% of US. Or that does not that should not dishearten India having only 6% of coastal mix, because India is a country with both coastal and inland geography. And much of our cargo, liquid cargo, is transported through pipeline, which is the most economical and most safest mode of movement. So in India, around 55% of cargo movement is through pipeline, 28% is by rail, 6% to 7% is by coastal, and balance by road. So having seen this, the cargo handling, what we have heard yesterday from our Honorable Prime Minister, from 2014, when it was 700 million metric ton, it has reached double to 1,500 million metric ton this year, and is expected to grow by another 1,000 million metric ton by 2025, which gives an immense potential, immense opportunity for Indian maritime industry. India is dependent, as has been also shared by Chairman Kamraju Port, is for its import. We all know India does not have much of the oil and gas reserves. It's just 15% of its total requirement, and around 80% of the requirement of processing the crude is being imported. For the last year, it was around 230 million metric ton. And not only crude, we also import around 60% of our LPG and LNG demand. We constitute around 15 million tons for LPG and 35 million tons for LNG. Add to that, we have imported around 5 million tons of finished product like petrol and diesel for meeting the domestic demand. So we can see on an approximately 200 million tons of bulk oil and gas cargoes are coastally moved into India for meeting the demand of India. These liquid cargoes and gases are being handled through 12 major ports, 6 at the east coast and 6 at the west coast, and being situated amongst the global and trade hubs, basically Singapore, Rotterdam, Fujairah, and Houston, provide huge opportunity for India to tap the bulk liquid and gas vessels transiting through these two international trade routes for becoming an emerging global hub for IMO bulk fuels. As we know, from January 2020 to have the emission norms, we are providing less than 5% sulfur, which we call very low sulfur fuel oil, for bunkering opportunities for all these vessels. Having seen this, to know what the future is, we should know what our present status of infrastructure is there, what our future demand would be there, and how we should reach there through our own infrastructure. So the opportunity in India, as we see, though we were at a good GDP of 7% a couple of years back, it nosedived to around -8% in 2020 for the obvious reasons which we all know, but it will rebound to around 11% by next 2 years, and it will be steady to 7% and 6% by next 10 to 20 years. Now, this GDP growth is basically driven by the huge drivers of rising income levels and mobility, infrastructure creation, port and airports creation, road infrastructure, and increasing industrialization. When we have a look at the present demography of 1.38 crores of population, 34% is of urban population and then balance is of rural. Now, the drivers of demand will by 2040 will make the population of India, which is expected to be 150 crores, will make the percentage to around 50%. This urbanization is basically a main reason for our development of the country. Now, if you look at the Indian oil, India's refinery production ability of crude and oil, we have got 23 refineries in the country. IOC have got 10 refineries with a capacity of 80.7, HPC 2 refineries along with MRPL 30.9, BPC 2 refineries 30.7, Reliance 68 million tons, Niara 120 million ton, HEML 11 million ton, which is a JV with HPC, and BORL 7.8, which is JV with BPC. Having seen this, you will have to look that there are major of our refineries which are inland as compared to the refineries which are on the coastal front. So, and during 2020, we had imported 230 million tons of product to meet the demand, and to meet my future demand, all these refineries are augmenting its capacities. And with one refinery, the Balmer refinery of government of Gujarat, a JV with HPC, would be coming up by 2025. And with that, the production capability will be around 292 million tons. Again, with one more greenfield refinery, which is now been approved at Manali in Tamil Nadu. With that 9 million refinery, we will be at around 345 million tons of food processing by 2030. So this is the ability what we have, we will be anticipating. But the demand is again what we are seeing here is again growing, and demand growth is more than what we are able to make up. Now, to reduce the growth of the demand under our government thrust, we are substituting MS demand with ethanol blending, As of now, we have 7.3% of ethanol blending pan-India, which we intend to have 10% of ethanol blending of the MS demand by 2022, which we intend to do it to 20% by 2025. Now, these initiatives, what have been taken by Government of India under MOPNG, is basically to reduce the MS and HSD import and in turn reduce the imports of crude, which is leading to our country. Similarly, we have targeted for 15% methanol blending in eastern part of the country by 2025, and HSD, which is a major chunk of our GDP or our transportation requirement or industrial requirement, we have targeted for blending it with 5% biodiesel by 2030. As of now, it is around 1%. Yes. More than that, what we have envisaged that we would try to, of the energy basket, which around 28% belongs to these fossil fuels, and presently 7% is around gas energy. We intend to increase this 7% of gas energy to 15% by 2030. Now, if we see the supply-demand gap, we see as of now there is a gap of 14 million tons, which with 2 or 3 refineries and then augmentation of the refineries would be at a break even at 2030. But post that, there is a huge gap of availability against the projected demand, even with blending with ethanol, methanol and biodiesel. So now this is a huge opportunity and a huge challenge for our Indian ports, for our Indian ministry, to see how to facilitate deliveries reach of these amount of quantity at our ports and make it reach to the hinterland. Now, if I have a look at it, the cargoes which comes to India for crude are basically of huge capacity vessels like VLCC, which carries 280 TMT, Suezmax 160 TMT, Alphamax 140 TMT, LR 80 and 90. Now, these vessels, because of economies of scale, have to be brought, and for that, as we don't have any port in the country to park these vessels, we have created SPMs, like which we call single point moorings, which is at 21 nautical miles from the shore, and from there these large vessels come there, and from there we have laid underground lines to the shore, and from there through various our pipelines around we move to various refineries. So having seen this, except for Chennai, where the BD1 and BD3 berths are there, where we are able to berth Suezmax and Alphamax, and now with a new jetty being created at Mumbai, where we can berth Alphamax 140 TMT. Rest, all these new, even the new refineries, what will be coming up at Manali, we will have to create our own SPM here. But these vessels which are coming with crude, they are also will require bunker fuels, which provide a huge opportunity for us. The second opportunity, the third opportunity is the LPG coastal import facility augmentation, and for this now as of now, to meet the demand of the country, we have existing 14 import terminals across the country, and to meet the demand, we have proposed for 4 more further import terminals. These import terminals, and if you look at the supply-demand balance, we find that each year, even as of now, till another 29-30, we have to import around 15 to 16, around 18 to 20 million tons of LPG into the country for meeting the demand. And if you have to look at the infrastructure that we have created, all these import terminals, they are connected with the pipelines, which goes into the hinterland for supplying the LPG to the various bottling plants. Now, why we have done this? Basically, when we are creating a pipeline, earlier LPG was moved by road, then it started moved by rail, and now we are creating these pipelines. So basically, we are converting road movement into rail into pipeline, so that we economically, safely, and fasterly push the product into hinterland where the demand is there. Now you see, we have a pipeline of 1,400 kilometers for Loni, from Jamnagar Loni. We have created a pipeline, Paradip Haldia Durgapur pipeline, which is of 660 kilometers. This again pipeline would be connected another Banka, Baroni, Muzaffarpur pipeline with 1,600 kilometer. Now this pipeline together will make it around 2,200 kilometer. But the icing on the cake is we in the country, we are laying a largest cross-country LPG pipeline in the world. Now this pipeline is around 2,800 kilometer with a capacity of 8.25 million metric ton. This is being created so as to take into the consideration the demand requirements, the requirement of meeting the requirement of LPG cooking gas for the future demand of the country. Now this will have around 3 bottling plants at Gujarat, connect to 6 bottling plants in Madhya Pradesh, 13 in Uttar Pradesh, and would be fed from 3 sources: Kandla, Piparwao, and Dahej. So having seen this, the fourth opportunity comes from LNG import facility. Again, when we see the supply-demand gap, the supply of LNG again is less than against our requirement, as we are trying to substitute fossil fuels with the use of LNG natural gases. Now there is a huge deficit in the future. For that, presently we are having 6 LNG import terminals at Dahej, Hajira, Dabhol, Kochi, Ennore, and Mundra. We are creating another 4 more import facilities, and then we are proposing another 4 more, which would become in a phased manner. With this, we expect that the LNG import, what Madam was also speaking in the earlier session, the LNG would come to India and we would be able to position it to hinterland for meeting the demand and substituting for our fossil fuels requirement. With this, if we have a look at the port, we have to port. If we have a look at that port, how port will function. Now, if you see Haldia, there are major ports in east and major ports in west. Haldia is a major port for us in the eastern sector. Paradip is one more port, and then Vizag. If you see at Haldia, earlier in 1819, there was 3.1 million handling, which increased to 3.7 in 1920, but how we get reduced to 1.8. This increase in the handling of pure product from 1819 to 1920 was because of BS4 to BS6 conversion, where we have to give lot of inputs of MS and HHD into Haldia, when our refineries like Haldia, Baroni, Bongaigaon refineries of East Region had gone for 2 or 3 months of shutdown for project upgradation to BS6 project. At that time, Paradip had really helped in meeting the demand by coastal movement to these eastern ports. And again, Chennai, we will see there would be an increase by 2.7. Kandla will be seeing an increase of 3.1, as we have seen that all the imports would be coming near to Kandla and Jamnagar, and hence the major ports which will be in future would be handling Kandla, JNPT, Mumbai, Kochi, and Ennore, Chennai, and Haldia, Paradip. Having seen this, we let us have a SWOT analysis of our ports which we are having. We have got 12 major ports, and under the Maritime Vision 2030, we intend to make world-class ports having world-class facilities and facilities to handle this much of volume which we are anticipating in the next 5 to 10 years. Haldia port does not have a night berthing, has a draft of 7 to 8 meters, and hence we can only handle a small parcel size of 18 to 20 TMT. Now we have vessels which we call MR vessels, which carry 40 TMT parcels, and hence these vessels have to be dead fetted. Now there is a demurrage, there is a 5 to 7 days of detention there because of various priority norms. It's costing around 0.5 crores per vessel. So, but again, Haldia is a major hub for Northeast. So we would look forward for augmentation of basically the draft through basically the dredging, and if the night berthing is provided at Haldia. If we look at Paradip, now Paradip is one of our flagship port, I should say. Earlier we had a North Oil jetty, but after this Paradip refinery has come, we have created this South Oil jetty. Now, when this South Oil jetty was not there, the structure of the bridge was like this. The land was going this way. We started dredging from 2014 to 2016. This waterway have been made at Haldia with a state of art, and we have a 14-meter draft. This is that portion of the area which we have created with a 14-meter draft, which was a flat land just in 2013-14, and we have got state-of-the-art handling facilities with night berthing, 10 automated marine loading arms, and a state-of-the-art firefighting and fire protection system. Having seen this, Vizag, again, we have a OR jetty, 1 OR3, OR3, but again,
Mr. Nigam, could you kindly be a bit fast because 3 more speakers are there.
Okay, sir. I'll just carry forward.
That's a small request. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, sir. Now, the fifth opportunity is the bunker opportunity for India, which we see. Now, having seen this, the major hubs are Singapore, Fujairah, Rotterdam, and Antwerp, and we see that Cochin, Mangalore, and the new ports of Kamaraju and Karaikal may become a major hub for bunkering operations. Presently, the bunkering volume is of 1.8 million tons, which is 1% of global consumption, equivalent to 1 month's volume of China and 1 week's volume of Singapore. But around 35,000 vessels comes to India in port for the cargo operations. Kochi and Mangalore are within proximity and can become a hub for bunkering operations. Now, if you look at the potential, only from our own vessels, we have a 3.5 million potential in 2020, which will rise to 4.8 million tons by 2030. But bunker fuel prices in India are not competitive to Singapore and Fujairah, and hence, and further cost towards stopover is to be compensated for with the service of demand. Now, if you look at the prices of VLSFO versus Singapore versus Kochi is around $20 to $30 more than per metric ton, which makes us the bunkering operations slightly uneconomical. Now, all these bunkering operations in the major ports are basically done along with the cargo operations, unlike in India where we have to do the bunkering only once the cargo operation is completed. Further, in India, the bunkering operations are scattered and there is a cost of transporting the product. The ability of bunkering is only at Koili and at Haldia, where from Koili we move it by rail to Kandla, and from there we move by vessels to all the ports across the country to meet the bunkering demand. Vizag, HPC and BPC Mumbai meets the demand locally from their own refineries. But the other option is how to increase the production of VLSFO. VLSFO is basically the low sulfur, which is made from the low sulfur crude from North Gujarat, Bombay High, and any additional 1 million ton of production would require to be substituted by 6 to 7 million tons of equivalent low sulfur, high sulfur crude, which works out to around 850 crores. And which would result in around $114 per metric ton to get a break even. Any imports which has to be bridged, suppose you have to have any import, that again attracts custom duty of 5% and 18% GST, which makes it uncompetitive and uneconomical for the things to be viable. Marching towards new future, towards the 5 trillion Indian economy by 2025 and 2024, there would be some corrections. We basically look forward if we can have a uniform berthing policy across all the ports. Now, once we have all these ports in a state of art with firefighting and fire protection system, I don't foresee why there would be any reason for giving any priority for any chemical vessels or vessels which is being now put on the priority. As a result, as of now, our vessels get detained by 3 days, 4 days, which is a cost to us. And in order to avoid that, we have to meet the demand through alternate modes by rail or by road at a higher cost. Night berthings is a must and has to be made as a norm and has to be put into Haldia, Port Blair, and Kandla. Haldia would require a dredging, immediate dredging, to have a draft of at least 10 meters so that it can handle a cargo of 13 million ton, because it is to be the gateway for Northeast for the inland waterways. More than 110 million tons of import of cargo, liquid cargo is anticipated by 2030 from the present 70 million. That means our ports like Vizag, Ennore, Kochi, JNPT, Mumbai has to be augmented to facilitate berthing of at least LR vessels of 60 TMT cargoes by phase 1, and LR2 80 TMT by phase 2 by 2024. Further, we have a redundancy in having adequate numbers of pilots, which has to be provided as per the international norms, where 2 pilots are being positioned. Unfortunately, the pilot which takes the vessel out, that only has to brings the vessel back to the port, leading to around 4 to 6 hours of detention of the parking. We can create a parking dock for the vessels to berth alongside for quick berthing and deberthing. STS facility is very required so that nitrates can be done. Presently, we have at Vizag, Mudra, and Bangalore, but it is only on the jetty. Further, slope discharge facilities, as being provided at Bangalore, need to be provided at all the ports. And needless to say, all the ports has to comply to OSD norms and has to have a standardized infrastructure facilities. Digitalization of port operations using blockchain, AI, and IoT, what has been spoken yesterday, would result in better scheduling and prompt clearance of bills. Capping of demurrage up to 90% of the previous years. Now, if I have to brief you on the amount of demurrage what we have incurred in 2018-19, IOC incurred a demurrage of 100 crores, industry as a whole 160 crores, which increased to 1920 by 170 crores, and industry at 260 crores. And 2021, as of now, IOC have incurred a demurrage of 136 crores again, and an industry of 190 crores. Now, this is a huge goal. Any reduction obviously will not reduce the price of the fuel, but it will really add to the bottom lines of the country to support the dividends to the shareholders and the government of India for the projects. What we would look forward for development of 6 out of the 65 small ports at major port as a short-term measure, and 4 ports to be made at smart ports by 2030. This is a major thing which we have to done to streamline our operations towards bunkering operations. Uniform policy to be adopted for bunkering operations for anchorage and outer port limit. What we a model which is being adopted by Cochin and Mumbai to be replicated, where it is being allowed to be done at 12 nautical miles. It also reduces the port dues. Formulation of policy is required for Indian ports to have
Mr. Nigam, I mean, we have 3 more speakers and question and answer session. So I think we have got a very good overview. So if you could kindly sum it up and close.
Right, sir. Okay. So last but not the least, we would look forward for restructuring of 9 Indian shipbuilding to the state-of-the-art shipbuilding, because for dry docking, which is compulsory for any ship after a year of 2 years of operation, we have to go to Colombo, Sri Lanka, and we don't have any such facilities in India. So we have to look forward for such facilities in India, so that we have a growth of ancillary industries and creation of jobs for to surge the India's GDP under Atmanirbhar capabilities and capacities. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Mr.
For giving me a patient hearing. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Now we move on to the third speaker, Mr. Jacob Sorensen, who is the Managing Director of APM Terminals Pipavav. He has been part of the AP Moller Maersk Group since 1987, starting at the internal AP Moller Shipping School in Copenhagen in Denmark. Over the years, he has held various positions within the group in Maersk Line, Maersk Logistics, and Damco in countries like Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Japan, and India. Mr. Jacob Sorensen, he holds an MBA degree from Henley Management College, London. He will be speaking about Opportunity India expansion and upgradation of bulk cargo capacity. Over to you, Mr. Jacob Sorensen.
Thank you very much, and I you will share my presentation. But I have to say, I think Mr. Nigam has put you know, the nail in the coffin, because it's absolutely critical that we get infrastructure upgraded, and that is very evident from his very elaborate presentation just before me here. I just would like to say also, Mrs. Clay, she made me think about one thing. In 1973, I was not that old, but I cried and I cried and I cried, and my mom said, "What are you crying about?" And I said, "I'm never going to drive a car." I think I must have been 6 or 7 years old at that time. And this was the oil crisis of 73. And I just got humbled by the thought that now I have a Tesla in the garage. I'm looking at all the young children that I meet in Gujarat. I look at all the young people in India, and I'm thinking, what are their aspirations? And I think, again, the presentations we have seen is that the demand is exploding. This is very clear to me that oil and gas and coal and some of the fossil fuels will be required. But at the same time, I definitely also hope that we will have technological breakthroughs that will enable us to take care of the environment and the planet, and at the same time grow. I think I will skip a few of the slides, and I would like to go deeply into addressing some of the practical things of expansion, because the egg is really for us in Pipavav. How are we going to expand our waterfront and our distribution capabilities without, at the same time, missing the opportunity? If you stay with this slide here, I can just briefly comment on that. But our real dilemma is that when we want to upgrade, doing the work will actually prohibit us from loading and discharging cargo at the time it takes to do the civil works and engineering and upgrades. So we are really trying to change the tire on the wheel, change the wheel on the bicycle while we are still riding it. That's really the art that we are to conduct. This slide just show how Pipavav Port in Gujarat, how we have grown to a very multimodal and multi-cargo port today. We have liquid, as you can see, we have containers, we have car export and potentially also car import. And we have what I think is going to be the game changer for us. We have the dedicated freight corridor linking us to the northern market. You can see the picture here of double stacked containers. The trains that we would be operating is going to be electrified, double track. The DFC will be double stack. The train length will be 1.5 kilometer and the speed will be double the speed of today. So we are very much blessed with this increase in the evacuation capabilities by rail. That's also why we have just commissioned now the first railhead for the capability of evacuating LPG by tanks on rail cars. But as I think also Mr. Nigam was showing us, in the long run, we will also in Pipavav be linked with an LPG gas line. And to accommodate that, I can say as a small contribution to this discussion, the challenge is not so much to find out what we need to build and what we need to upgrade, but it's the how. So it is the business plans, it is the internal approvals of CapEx, it is the convincing of people, in my case, sitting far away in boardrooms in Europe, that we have this magnificent growth opportunity, and we just need to spend more money on upgrading the capabilities. What we are trying to do in Pipavav right now as we speak is to be able to accommodate VLGC carriers, very large gas carriers, so we can increase the intake of LPG as was presented by the former speaker. My challenge is really to say, how do we do that without decommissioning or without stopping to handle our customers' business in the next 6 to 9 months? So that is really how we are looking for the assistance from engineers on to find a way to change the wheel on the bicycle and ride it at the same time. Next slide.
Mr. Jacob, have you switched on your video? I can't see.
I haven't. Oh, you can not see me. I'll switch on the. Here we go. So you can see myself as well. I just want to make this brief here, but you can see as a multi commodity port with containers, liquid, ro-ro, and bulk services, what we try to do in Pipavav is also to be known as Gujarat Green Gateway. So, for example, in bulk, we have both last year during COVID, but also in the beginning of this year, we have actually record imports of fertilizer. We're building a new fertilizer shed for the bagging of this, which is being evacuated then by rail. On top of the roof, we are putting a solar plant. And this is again to cover the energy requirements in a renewable and sustainable manner. I'm quite hopeful that we would become the shore base, not only for Bombay High, which was mentioned by the former speaker as well, but certainly also for maybe new offshore wind turbine farm that should come 20 miles of Gujarat on the coastline, so that we can harvest the wind energy. And all of this is obviously going to be complementary to some of the more established conventional energy forms. Next slide. This is maybe again too complicated. I think it has been covered, what is driving the demand and how we are linked to the Indian clusters and consumer clusters. So I think we skip this and go to the next slide. So this is really what I was talking about. This is what we are trying to do in Pipavav. How do we expand and accommodate? In this case, even I would have to say we start with partially loaded VLGCs because of the draft. How do we do that while still maintain our 100% operation? So that is what we're trying to do in partnership with one of our good customers, Aegis Gas. Again, even when we get the pipeline, I'm happy to say that also the rail evacuation will not be cannibalizing. It'll just be complementary to be able to accommodate more and more volumes here. In fact, if we go to the next slide, just a small thing we are working on as well in connection with Sagamala. As you can see here, this illustrates just if LPG has to be taken by tanks and go around the Gulf of Kampat by road. I think this is quite logic to see how big a detour this is to reach South Gujarat. What we're working on is to establish a ro-ro ferry connection between Pipavav and Hazira, so that we can take tankers by ferry and reach the market in a much shorter distance, much faster, and again saving the environment for all those trucks on the road. Next slide. I'd like to come to the slide number 10. In fact, here's a little bit of a list of what we're looking at to expand the various things, but I'd like to maybe wrap up in the interest of time and go to the next slide, please. Sustainability. I believe that even though we are moving LPG and fossil fuels and so on from AP Moller and from Maersk, it is really crucial that we look at the sustainability. You may have seen that we have committed to deploy our first zero carbon footprint vessel by 2023. I mentioned the offshore wind turbine. They're actually very relevant because we are really pushing to get this pilot in south of Pipavav port. I mentioned ro-ro ferries. I think again, Indian waterways and transport by coastal and inland waterways is a huge opportunity for India to reduce consumption and again reduce the emission of greenhouse gases. So just in short, we're doing whatever we can in Pipavav to upgrade the capabilities. The challenges are plenty, but we know what to do. We are struggling how to do it, how to get the capex approved, how to get the green light, and get the top management to approve all our business plans. But again, it's very exciting. And then how do we execute it? Because we have these bottlenecks, as I think my former speaker illustrated so much. There's so many things to do and actually so little time to do it. I think I'll end here and enable us to maybe get to question and answer. And again, thank you very much for having me at this session here, because indeed there is so many things to do. and so little time.
Thank you, Mr. Sorensen. Thank you for the crisp presentation. Let us now invite Mr. Rajesh Makwana, who is the Deputy Inspector General of the Indian Coast Guard. He is presently posted as Chief of Staff, Coast Guard Region Northwest and Gandhinagar. Earlier, he was heading the Coast Guard in the state of Odisha. He is an alumnus of the prestigious College of Defence Management, Secunderabad, and holds a Master's in Management Studies. He has a unique distinction of being decorated twice for gallantry by the Honorable President of India. Over to you, Mr. Makwana.
And he's a good friend of mine.
Oh yes, Mr. Jacob. So that is why I gave a ring to you to open your screen.
Kemcho.
All good, all good.
Oh, good, good.
Let's see. There's a problem in sharing of the content. Yeah. Yeah, share please.
Can the FICCI team intervene?
No, I think are we okay? Can everybody see the presentation now?
No, sir. Actually, ma'am, we have not received the presentation from DIG Makwana. And I think the internet connectivity is a bit bad at their end.
So Mr. Makwana, maybe we can present it even without the presentation. You can put
Or
across.
maybe, yeah, maybe, sir, if you can, if your office can send us the presentation, we will download it at our end. In the meantime, maybe we can move to the next speaker,
Yes.
whatever the convener suggests.
Okay, we'll do this way. In that case, I'll just send the rest to you. Okay.
Okay, then we can move on to the fifth speaker. Let us then move on to the fifth speaker, Mr. Abhijit Hussain.
Wait a second. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, please, Rajesh, please.
Yeah. Can you see the presentation right now?
We are not able to see the presentation.
Okay. Okay, fine.
So let us move on to Abhijit Hussain, Senior Sales Manager, Marine Solutions, Emerson, Dubai. He has 22 plus years of industry experience in the field of instrumentation and automation solutions across India, Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa. He has been serving the hydrocarbon industry from oil and gas upstream to downstream, including midstream sector of end destination fluid transportation. Currently, he is driving adoption of global best practices of onboard automation solutions in the marine industry. Mr. Hussain.
Thank you so much, ma'am. A very good day to all and namaskar all across the globe. Then in this new normal world, I would say it's important. It's not only important to stay safe, which is critical, but I would also say stay connected, as this is the best session, which says the connection has to be on. Yeah, I would, in the meantime, I would start my presentation. I'm sharing it. One sec. Just let me know if you can see. Can all see my screen? Yes?
Yes. Yes.
I would just keep it aside. That's it. I think the screen is clean. So I'm happy to be here to share our experience, especially with the role of technology, the equipment and digital operations happening in marine fluid transportation. So it really, we will be sharing how the technologies have been in, how they are evolving. So as the backdrop which you can see here on the presentation, it covers the waters of the marine industry and different operations. So technology in the marine industry is fast evolving, and with an increasing amount of proven technologies further coming in from aviation and oil and gas industry, making inroad to our marine applications. So we are at the crossroad now with automation getting further ingrained into marine transportation, as well as cybersecurity posing to be a concern. So leaving the industry to relook and scrutinize the way forward. Into this next slide, throughout its way, the different terminals or the exploration that we are seeing across. For example, the Emerson technologies find its way during the different stages of a fluids value chain, right from extraction in the upstream sector to processing of crude oil to stabilize crude for transportation, and other products to transportation, further down to delivery and storage or transfer of those deliveries, which is happening through in the waters, is happening to the liquid cargo tankers and vessels. So various technologies are applied. For example, land storage applications, as you see here, one of the technologies are the terminals, which is predominantly rugged and proven because it's a non-contact type technology. It is the liquid radars on the tanks and the systems. They're helping to measure and monitor tank levels. In certain applications, it's along with differential pressure and direct density measurements to ensure safety and effective handling of various fluids, especially including LNG and LPG. Yeah. May I request somebody to mute? I don't know, it's Mr. Vaidyanathan. Yeah, as we go on to the waters where the liquid vessels are, including the tankers, these similar technologies, radars and other technologies like actuation systems, fuel bunkering systems or consumptions are all important, and these are implied with meeting regulatory norms of IMO, and they are fine-tuned for marine applications. So when we get into a vessel, a liquid cargo vessel, I'm just taking the pointer here. So liquid cargo monitoring uses radar very accurately to measure and monitor liquid levels. In the radars, the technology which is evolving is over the years, radars have been in use in the liquid cargos, and it is with the ruggedness required for the tough environment of the waters. The marine world and the marine vessels, we had to develop the frequency modulated continuous wave radars. The radar industry developed those, which does have redundancy, as well as they are 2-in-1 solutions with mirrored sensor technologies. And they are optimized, they are marine approved by global bodies, and they're optimized to work in these harsh environments. When we look at these, they have special softwares and hardware, ensuring despite the various challenges of measuring level on board in the waters, it is able to handle different fluid types, the sloshing that happens when the sea is rough or when the cargo is moving, as well as the bubbles which are there. They're all neutralized to enable accurate measurement of cargo via these radars. It's evolving further to get better and better. So, but it has become an industry de facto. When we talk about these liquid cargo transportation and vessels, one of the primary components that helps the cargo move safely is also the actuation solutions on board. The valve remote controlled actuator systems help in not only transferring the fluid, the cargo during a loading and offloading, but it also helps to maintain the stability during such operations as well as while in waters. There are when dealing with hydrocarbons, is obviously hydrocarbons are very critical chemicals. Obviously, hydrocarbons like LNG and LPG, which are very light hydrocarbons, they are very safe. I mean, it's a very environment friendly hydrocarbon, LNG and LPG, mainly LNG. So, but at all ends and primarily to these two fluids, safety is prime. So ship operations have been rugged, and more and more the best practices that we are seeing across with our marine customers of handling liquid cargo is and the bodies is while we are handling these operations and the measurements, it's important. It necessitates the need for an efficient and effective safety system on board. So and it is being regulated and it's coming more stringent. It's important to be safe by having a solid independent alarm system, more so for LNG cargo as well as at times in LPG. It's becoming an industry norm spearheaded by SICTO as well as IMO. Yeah. The next topic I would like to quickly cover in this short session is fuel bunkering. Why I'm covering fuel bunkering? Because 60% of liquid cargo or a vessel's operation is taken care by the fuel that gets into as well as that gets consumed. And in bunkering, as we know, as Mr. Nigam showed the different ports of the globe, bunkering is something which is primary to every vessel because it needs the fuel to move. And traditional fuels, the fuel oils, the new fuels of IMO 2020, the VLSFO and the LSMGOs, as well as the new the new environment-friendly fuel getting into bunkering is LNG. All are measured in mass because consumption on board happens in mass. This transfer globally happening on board the vessel from the terminals or bunker terminals is also in mass because mass is primary and it takes away all the transparency. But conventionally, it has been challenging. For example, in fuel oil, which are very viscous, when the bunker fuel oil gets transferred on board, there are challenges of sometimes cappuccino effect, and the existing technologies or the conventional technologies were having the challenge how to get the fuel measured in mass transparently. So with this, the technology existed for more than 2 decades on board is the Coriolis technology, which is a direct mass measuring technology. It also measures the density, but the technology really takes away the challenges of cappuccino effect. It can measure liquid very accurately despite in a cappuccino environment without getting broken apart. So the lines are more available when the bunker is taken in or in any liquid cargo bunker barge. If it is needed to be bidirectional, Coriolis technology supports the bidirections. Hence, ports like Singapore has de facto as well as mandated the use of mass flow meters on bunker barges, and many other ports are looking at it. There are quite a few European ports looking at it, as well as the other ports are also looking at it. But it takes away the ease of the difficulties and it makes it easy to measure. Soon, LNG bunkering is coming on board. There are a few vessels which have already gone ahead, a few owners, and LNG bunkering will need additionally, apart from mass flow meters, it will also need to measure the LNG that is bunkered in the fuel quality. So a chromatograph really helps give the complete insight of what's the gas composition, establishes the energy content, what the ship has received, the liquid cargo ship, and then how it's going to get consumed. So a sampling based gas chromatograph on board really does the job, along with the the LNG bunkering solution. Last but not the least, all these bunkering solutions, the technologies help save and optimize and makes the process transparent. In LNG specifically being critical, there is a boil-off gas line, which also gets measured, and it's a certified solution from global body like NMI. So while we said that the mass is critical to get on board because of the trade of bunkers getting on board is in mass, but actually if you look at consumption as a chemical reaction happens in mass. So again, the Coriolis comes in picture. This adoption is going very fast, getting into the yards, but owners are driving it also because it's to their benefit, because these are very much into critical fuel in and fuel oil, fuel in and fuel return lines of the engines. The Coriolis here are very small size Coriolis. They are pretty much more than 40 years experience, actually, even 30 years experience for boil-off gas solutions in the engine rooms. So what we see here is a direct mass measuring technology getting you to help establish an energy baseline. And not only it establishes an energy baseline, it also helps depicts the need to look at predictive maintenance of an engine, which is primary to the liquid cargo vessel, whether it's consuming more. For example, if it's consuming more, this measurement reliably gives the signal, and the signal can be taken across even to a remote land centralized location via cloud. So it really digitizes or enables the digitization to happen. So the primary technology is very rugged, but also it's capable of supporting the digital transformation that's happening in the industry. So this slide actually just depicts the conventional fueled vessels or the engines, as well as the new engines of LNGs or dual fired. So the fuel in and out, the return lines and the supply lines both has meters by class, and Coriolis meters are also existing where the owners can look at adopting for getting them the real energy base time and helping their engines to be predictably maintained and saved before the impact. Moving quickly to the next slide, I wanted to take a glimpse of what we speak as we talk about a liquid cargo vessel. So cargo monitoring is the first thing that we get into our heads, right? So cargo monitoring with 40 years plus proven in field is the radar technology, the non-contact type, evolving to be for marine. It's a frequency continuous modulated waves type technology. So they go on board on the deck as sensors on the tank heads, and the system, the cabinets and the system goes in the cargo control room. The next in line, we spoke about fuel efficiency with bunkering in the vessel or in bunker barges in and out of the vessel. The bidirectional Coriolis, the big sizes, they go on the deck again, and the control system or the system fuel monitoring system goes into the cargo or the bridge, wherever. The requirement to be in the engine room with fuel monitoring, as we discussed on consumption. So these meters are pretty rugged to be in the harshest environment in the applications, which is the engine room or the purifier room. They go in with remote electronics and all that, and they have been working very, very nicely to, without making any surprises to the customers who are sailing through. Very critical to these, which I just touched upon in between, the actuation. So remote actuation not only supports on the deck for the cargo movement, which is critical, but also the remote actuations are on the ballast tanks, which is important for the stability of the vessel. So they go hand in hand, and their cabinets get into the cargo control room with a workstation and all. And as a feed for any cargo transfers or any stability of the system through the valve control systems, there is a ballast tank level gauging is equally critical as technology to be looked upon. So most of the vessels are looking at this automation, these automations which I'm talking about, and they control or they support the vessel to be stable, safe all the time, during transfers, during voyage, everything. And furthermore, the supervisory comes on board. So that was overall on the vessel. Now, the last part, which I wanted to just get a peek into the future is, it's not a far future, it's very near. So it's a digital ecosystem, which is where our marine industry is getting ready for it. There is a lot of R&D which is presently happening and spent on the same to make shipping safe and with minimal human interventions. The data has to be transferred, the measurements have to be transferred, the safety looked upon has to be visible as much as possible. So digitization, as you see here for one of the examples which we have put up, is plant web. This is on board. The digitization is is predominantly on the land applications, but already on board on offshore vessels like FPSOs, where the FPSOs are well equipped, floating in the sea with all these digitalization, right from data collection, measurement and data collection to connectivity of the systems on board, analytics taking further and getting to the services level at a centralized location and furthermore. So it helps achieve a top quartile performance. Shipping industry being a floating industry, expanding these proven digital technologies into the marine realm has already begun. And sooner or later, we'll see the transportation will be integrated with the digitalization, paving its way even for probably a transatlantic autonomous shipping, which is not exactly a dream anymore. It's going to be a reality. With this, I would like to say thank you to all. Special thanks to FICCI for organizing these. Thank you for the chair lady. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. Anybody has any questions, feel free to approach us. My contacts are here, and look forward. Have a great day. Stay safe.
Thank you, Abhijit. Do we have Mr. Rajesh Makhwana's slides now?
Yeah, can I share my presentation now from my computer for 1 second?
Yes, please.
Good.
Just to inform, we have already shot over our time. We were supposed to close at 2, but Kiki, I think we can extend for another 10 minutes.
Certainly, ma'am. Yes, we can.
Yes, please.
Rajesh, sir, I think we could run the presentation on your behalf.
I think you can
Yes.
use the copy.
I'm doing that right up.
Yeah, please. Now, do I have any control over this, or I'll have to say next every time?
Yeah, you'll have to tell us, sir. And we will advance the slides.
Okay. So I'll just try to manage, because basically I wanted to control my own presentation. So a very good afternoon to everyone. Namaskar, and to a very distinguished panel here. And just, some time back, our dear friend Jacob Sorensen, he said about the aspirations of the young Indians. So, Mr. Jacob, I think what I know is all the young Indians, they want to drive a good Ferrari. So that is what is their aspirations. And so I'll just start with my thing, though the time is less, but I would like to present the concerns which have been related to the movement of the bulk liquid cargo. Next slide. Certain photographs which I am just going to flash, just will go through, and it will tell you about the effects which the oil will have on the sea animals and fishes. Next. 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 This is the Mauritius spill, which was quite recent. Next. Next. And this is the Deepwater Horizon. Next. Yeah, next. Okay. So the purpose of pushing these pictures at start was to induce a sense of earthiness or a tender environment feel amongst all these stakeholders. It's true that there is only one incident enough to tear apart the ecology of a large area wherein the full recovery will not take place for at least next 30 to 40 years. And this has been proven by seeing the Exxon Valdez spill. Next slide. So that was a word of caution, and as it can be seen that many species which are shown in this chart, they have still not been recovered from the Exxon Valdez spill, which happened in 1989. Next slide. However, the good news is that the total number of incidents has been declining, reducing. As we can see that from 1970 onwards, the number of incidents has gone down drastically. Next slide. So seeing the trend from 1970 till date indicates that the number of oil spills per year and per decade has reduced considerably. But the volume of cargo has increased tremendously over these years. Next. The increase in number of VLCC and ULCC in last 25 years has climbed to thousands. Now this indicates that the volume of liquid per carrier has gone up exponentially, which also points to the fact that if we are complacent, only one incident is enough to destroy a very big environment and ecosystem. Next. With the impetus on seaborne trade and offshore and inshore infrastructure by the Government of India, and looking at the worldwide trends of the movement of cargo, I personally believe that we will have a notable increase in the seaborne trade, and it's likely that the bulk liquid cargo and chemicals import and export will increase. This upward trend will go for next 8 to 10 years, plateau thereafter. However, as of now, the bulk liquid cargo is set to increase with the increase in energy demand. But how much? So I leave it to the experts in the commerce field to study how much and analyze, as this bulk liquid cargo movement will have a direct relationship in future with the non-conventional energy production, which has been rising exponentially around the world. With the new green hydrogen-based policy initiatives, offshore wind energy production policy, we can roughly deduce that our seas are going to see increased activity in SLOCs, that is sea lanes of communication, ports, oil fields, and SPMs. Next slide. But this will be the concerns. So our concern is the safety and security of seafarers, cargoes, and ships, which is self-explanatory. Please, only one point at a time. The navigational safety is another concern which we have. Basically, with the increase in traffic, there is definitely a load which comes on the navigational aspect of the channels, navigational aspect of the seas. This is something which we need to have a caution about. Unseaworthy ships is an issue which we had been making a noise about for last so many years. So this is something which obviously the regulators have to be cautious about. The preservation of marine parks, sanctuaries, and the adverse effects on pelagic planktons and zooplanktons in case of possible spills or in case of spills. I think this is also a concern and has to be kept in mind. Next. Next. The issue of intentional discharges by ships is an issue which also I would like to raise, because it has been happening around the coast of India, that lots of ships have been doing intentional discharge without even informing anybody. And because of this, all along the west coast, the tar balls have been appearing in various places. There have been conflicts with the fisheries community and industry, fisheries industries also. And there are a lot of incidents also which have been reported. But however, we think that these things can come at a normal level. Next. Shoreline preservation is another issue, and with the government now opening up a lot of islands for the tourism, I think this is one area which has to be given an impetus. Next. Piracy is another issue. Although in the last few years, the piracy has gone down drastically, and we only have certain incidents of petty theft. But however, with the increased traffic, there is always an increase. There is always a piracy thing which can increase. We'll have to be cautious about it, and we have to increase our capacities as far as the piracy issue is concerned. Next. Regulation is another issue wherein we need to dwell upon, and we need to make our regulations a little bit stricter. Next. Now, this is one issue which we have been dealing, but then definitely it's not even the Indian Coast Guard which needs to increase the capacity and capability for dealing with various spills. There are various other agencies also which we had been requesting them to increase their capacity and capability for dealing with certain spills. And as the nodal agency for dealing with the spills in India, we would request that everybody to have a look at their own capabilities and try to increase the capacity slowly and gradually. Next. environment encompasses each and everything. So it is self-explanatory. And coming to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Now, the safeguards, cautions, and readiness and preparedness, which we must have as far as the field is concerned. So I would like to suggest a few points in this is setting up of pollution-related incident reporting, communication and ops centers, generally to be located in each and every state and have interconnectivity along with various organizations. Next. The detection capability as far as the detection of the oil spills or chemical spills is concerned, we know that there has been an evolution quality improvement in the detection of oil spills. And the use and development and maturation of remote sensing as it has been proven. And the SAR images, that is the synthetic aperture radar images, they provide a fundamental way for monitoring coastal and ocean waters. And I would request that we should increase our detection capabilities in this area. Next. The capabilities to mobilize PR pollution response equipment to deal with the incidents. At present, the pollution response equipment there are various pollution response centers, but wherein if we have to move these equipment because these equipment are bulky, so we need synergy and we need support from a lot of agencies to help us mobilize the pollution response equipment. Next. The training of manpower as far as the field of spill response is concerned, this is another area, gray area. Although we have institutionalized the IMO level training periodically for stakeholders, but the participation leaves a lot to be desired. And thus, in all sincerity, all stakeholders are requested to depute their designated staff for basic training on pollution response at our various training centers. Next. Here, I would also like to propose a 1 mile safety zone around the marine sanctuaries, marine parks, and the oil rigs. Although we already have a 500-meter zone, but then I would like to propose an increase to 1 mile safety zone. Next. The norms of crew qualification amongst all classes of ships, that is self-explanatory. Next. While coming to the increased capacity for dealing with the spills, includes response equipments, the dispersants, the PPE equipment. Towards this, we have recommended the inventory for stakeholders about various equipment, but this still remains a sore point, and I would request all the stakeholders to kindly increase their capacity accordingly, as advised. Next, please. Now, we also approve the oil spill disaster contingency plans in respect of states, ports, and oil handling agencies and various companies. As of now, majority of the oil spill disaster contingency plans have been going back and forth between Coast Guard and respective agency. But it is imperative that all the observations are being liquidated at the earliest. Here, we, the Indian Coast Guard, we have an advisory and monitoring role, but there are no penal powers for non-compliance. So this is one area that should change. A clear and defined law on oil, chemical spills, and pollution has to be promulgated to regulate the environment-related issues of our seas, shorelines, and ecosystems. Next. Next. Legal regime I've already talked about, and the identification and training of various voluntary organizations towards shoreline cleanup. It is a very, very gray area, shoreline cleanup, which we have seen in many of the world's big spills or major spills. So it requires a lot of hard work and a lot of volunteers to clear up the shorelines. So we need our own a big effort to register the voluntary organizations as far as the shoreline cleanup is concerned. Next. Identification of dumping sites for recovered oil, sludge, and chemicals. Now, because of their property, we know that they are to be dumped in places wherein they do not create any kind of a trouble for the normal things. Next. Strict implementation of ballast water management and monitoring mechanism for aquatic nuisance species. We all know the famous cases of zebra mussels in the United States. We should not have any aquatic nuisance species, which should be coming here. Plus the ballast water management, that needs to be strictly implemented. Next. Now here is my request to all is that we need Indian innovation towards developing robotics and AI-based remote spill recovery equipment. So this is a new field. Presently, we have nil indigenous capability in this regard. So I would request the industry to kindly put the foot forward and innovate in this field also. Next, please. And the same thing here, the remote operated shoreline cleanup equipment and also required. So our own entrepreneurs can move towards this. Next, please. Yeah. Next. These are some of the photographs of the pollution response exercises and the training which we have been conducting for the industry. Next. 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 So protection of seas for oil pollution and chemicals is of immense importance. And all measures should be taken to prevent and protect our coastlines. We should be guarded beforehand that a tragedy like Exxon Valdez or BP does not occur in our waters. And God forbid, even if it does, we should be well prepared in advance to tackle. India occupies a commanding position in the Indian Ocean. So it must provide the lead to other nations by providing tougher laws in the matter of protection of environment, especially in the matter of dangers resulting from oil spills and chemical spills. To overcome this, the policy of prevention is always better than cure has to be followed. For prevention of an environment catastrophe, there is an urgent need of new laws backed by international agreements. Whatever it is, but at the end, so all the stakeholders who have to be conscious, disciplined, and responsible for the sustained development in the maritime domain. Next. With this, I end my presentation. So thank you very much, everybody, and wish you all safe and good seas.
Thank you, Mr. Makwana. Because of the paucity of time, we will not be able to take the question and answers. The questions which come in the WhatsApp group will be mailed to the individual speakers, and the mailing IDs will be provided to them. With this, I would request Mr. Sunil Kumar, Joint Secretary, Refineries, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, to deliver the summing up remarks and the vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, good morning, and namaskar to everyone. I believe you all have an exhaustive session with our eminent speakers. On behalf of Government of India, FICCI, it is our pleasure that you had a fruitful discussion, though I think 90 minutes are not enough. I would take this opportunity to thank the eminent speaker, Dr. Catherine Clay, Mr. Rajesh Nigam, Mr. Yakub Frisch Sorensen, Mr. Abhijit Singh Gosai, and Mr. Makwana for covering entire scope of bulk liquid cargo transportation. In the beginning, Dr. Clay covered in detail the terminal industry supply chain while covering the emerging global trends in bulk liquid cargo. She elaborated the criticality of terminals in intramodal movement of energy, because she also mentioned about the pandemic-led crisis of last year, and also Mr. Yakub had mentioned about his childhood story of not able to drive a car. Because in our industry, in petroleum industry, the whole thing depends from well to will. We depend on infrastructure. And port is one of the nodal terminals, which is very, very critical for energy movement. On the terminal area, Mr. Jakobsen, Mr. Jakob Sorensen, sorry for pronouncing incorrectly, has enlightened us on the opportunities that India has in terms of expansion and upgradation of bulk cargo capacity. He elaborated challenges based on his experience at Pipavav port, which is a multimodal port. He also explained how it is difficult to work while the port is functioning. He mentioned about different facilities they are using to reduce the congestion and use of RO vessels for cargo transportation from Hazira pipeline, Hazira plant. Mr. Gosai was very elaborate with his technology details on the shipping operations. And he mentioned about how the technology helping in terminals, bunkering, liquid transfer, fuel consumption in engine technology. He also mentioned how cargo monitoring can be done with remote operations. And it feels that with advent of technology in future, port infrastructure can be offered as service also. Finally, Mr. Makwana has mentioned about environmental and safety aspects, especially in case of liquid cargo. Recently, we had an incident of empty diamond near Sri Lankan coast, where Coast Guard has very well managed the whole issue, and we could not could capture and manage no spill, hardly any spill was there. So that I again congratulate Coast Guard team for that action they took near the Sri Lankan waters. Mr. Makwana has thoroughly covered the challenges associated with handling of bulk liquid cargo. Cecil focused on environmental concern. He eliminated and elaborated all the concerns which are very, very valid. And we also know what is the cost of an accident. The people say, let's have an accident. So the sense of ecological damage and the liquid spill are impressed upon by Mr. Makwana, and it stressed on the safety issue. In the ministry, I also deal with the safety of oil and gas infrastructure, and I know what are the concerns. Finally, I would like to thank Mr. Rajesh Nigam for sharing us with the current status of bulk cargo transportation in India and infrastructure development in oil and gas sector. He lucidly and quite in detail mentioned the present and future requirement of oil and gas industry, including potential of bunkering facility in the busy corridor. I will not take much time, which I only say with further addition to our refining capacity. And we are setting up also new refineries, which will increase our crude demand. This would push for increase of port infrastructure. The upgradation of our existing port structure, availability of night berthing facility at major ports that we mentioned and requested port authorities to do and go for that. Standard operating procedures at ports, focus on port safety, better terminal infrastructure, and availability of bunkers at competitive rates would result in substantial increase in cargo, as well as reduction in demurrage for our companies in future. One more thing, that digitization of the new upcoming infrastructure is very, very critical, and we hope that port infrastructure will be with the latest digitization with automation, IoT, etc. will be there. And finally, I express all my appreciation to all the participants for taking their time out from the busy schedule to attend this seminar. I also thank FICCI team, my fellow conveners, for inviting me to join this session as a convener. With this remarks, I would like to close this session, and I wish everyone a very prosperous and happy future. And we all, I'll take from the mic from the chairman, Kamgar Port Trust, that let us join in the journey towards growth and prosperity and Atmanirbhar Bharat. With this, I thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.